most tippy-top arena achievement of spirituality is the same as death. This is something nobody really sees, but it's right there in plain sight. And why? Because what is spirit? Something synonymous with mind, let's say? Let's just go from there. What does it ultimately want? It wants to understand itself. It wants to apprehend itself. Which is to say, it wants consciousness of itself. How is consciousness built? Well, that which is, such a spirit of mind, already is itself. Just as you already are yourself. Just as the I already is itself. But the I can't see itself. Even in a mirror, it's reversed, it's distortion, it's not the same. The I will never see itself. So what's the best it can do? It can produce things outside of itself. At the human level, we call these things art, science, all the cultural productions of man, of mind, a poem, a song, piece of art. And then we look as perceptive beings, just as that I does. We look out at what we've just created. And now these things can tell us something about ourselves, because a thing always tells you something about its creator. Right? So in the same sense, spirit, a mind, the one, the all, absolute God, whatever you want to call it, is doing the same thing, because it itself cannot grasp itself. It already is itself, but it's seeking to understand itself. So it has to produce things outside of itself. Now, let's go back to the human level to explore this. How this building of consciousness works at our level, right? Because what you need to understand is that the building of consciousness at a grander level, it's like a fractal, right? We are part of something bigger, but the system it's self-reflective. It sort of works similar, whether it's small or large. So the way that we build consciousness is very much akin, can reveal something about how the greater mind that we're a part of builds consciousness, builds awareness of itself, right? So let's return to our level, the human level. How do we do it? Like I said, we first have to create products via the intellect. We are awareness first and foremost, right? That is the most puzzling thing in science of mind, philosophy of mind at the moment. Even more puzzling than consciousness is awareness itself, this sort of primal base layer. So we are aware first and foremost. And then what the intellect does is essentially grasps. It attaches to things. This is what the Buddha was trying to qualm, was this tendency of the intellect, in other words, to always attach and grasp onto things, right? Because we are awareness first and foremost, but that's not consciousness. Consciousness is something that's built out of something, out of a completion of a feedback loop, let's say, right? Self-reflective feedback loop. But awareness can only distinguish itself from another moment because it's changed, because it's attached to some sort of something that differentiates this moment from a last moment. And these are the objects I was talking about earlier. These are the abstractions. So what we do, we are awareness. We look out into the world, we perceive, and then we crystallize, we harden in the form of memory, and at a higher level in the form of art or scientific theorem or thinking, and we crystallize those into more rigid forms, right? Whether it's an artwork, whether it's a piece of writing, a poem, or scientific theory. Now, what's most important here is that these things, in relation to life itself, are inert, right? They stand still in time, even if for a short amount of time. Because an artwork will always decay. The elements will have its way on a sculpture. And even the thoughts, they always change, they'll decay as a culture changes. But in relation to the absolute change and becoming of life itself, they are inert. Now, to bring this all together, why I'm saying spirituality, the highest points of spirituality, because what spirituality is, ultimately, is spirit or mind itself trying to understand itself in its most absolute perfect sense, right? At the highest level. And this is only done with these abstractions, with these crystallized products of awareness, right? Because the mind, to reiterate, we're awareness, first and foremost. Awareness needs to distinguish itself by building products outside of itself because it can't grasp itself. And these products are the products of intellect. And then from awareness looking at these products and completing a feedback loop, that's how consciousness is built. And the ultimate intent of spirit is the highest point of consciousness, of self-awareness, to understand itself. That's spirituality. So that must mean that the highest point of spirituality is death itself, because that which builds consciousness fundamentally for awareness are these inert, dead, abstract products. And these things, in contrast to the becoming nature of life, to the constant worming, moving, writhing, creative force of nature, these things are different in that they're inert, they're dead. They have no life anymore. As soon as you've crystallized something, as soon as you put down a first brush stroke to try to paint this tree, that brush stroke it's dead relative to the becoming nature of the tree, right? There's a variance of degree to this deadness. But I'm saying at the highest point, the absolute ultimate consciousness, this highest apprehension, is the most inert thing that we can try to get, right? That's what the aim of intellect is, the aim of science. We're trying to find the truth, and what we call the truth is to try to find that one universal, the essence, the thing that stands through all of time, right? If you're trying to find the essence of a tomato, you're trying to find what defines, what that singular thing that stands still through time, that's true for all tomatoes, regardless of time, right? That's what we call essence. But this thing is dead. It doesn't change. It stands still in time. And that's what the intellect is fundamentally after. But the movement of spirit towards highest consciousness requires the intellect and its formation of these abstract, inert, dead products. And thus, the pursuit of highest spirituality itself, is synonymous with death, is death itself. So much so that I think it's true to say that one way to look at life, what life is, the trajectory of life, the ultimate movement from birth, what we call life, into death, is the movement of spirit, so to speak, right? And we can use the life path of an individual human being as a great analogy for understanding what I'm saying here. What is that? When we're born, we're completely open, pure possibilities. We are just awareness. A baby's looking, if you ever watched a baby, they're looking around trying to figure everything out. They're tripping fucking balls 24/7. But as they grow, just in like a wave function collapse in quantum physics, they start to collapse into certain ways of thinking. They learn certain paths. And this openness collapses. And then as you get older, you study certain things in school, you choose a certain path in college, a certain career, your options limit. You close down, you collapse into certain paths, right? All based on some sort of feeling or instincts, hopefully, or following your heart, a guide in your being. So that ultimately at the time of, as you're approaching death, you're whittling your options You have less and less openness, less and less conflict and energy and vitality as you had in your youth. But all so you can finally get to this. You're ultimately trying to find what's the one essence of what you are, right? This whittling down into that one essence of what you are. And that itself is moving towards death. Another way to look at this is how the relationship with death and decay in so many spiritual traditions, right? Yeah, even in the in popular culture with like tripping or like taking certain drugs, we call it ego death. The word death is right there. It's a certain death of self. In Buddhism, the jhanas, there's a certain burning away. There's certain death, right? The practice of meditation, you're actually like sitting. The first thing you're trying to burn away is the sensations of the body. Then you're burning away burning away the mind. You're letting the mind run its course, so it sort of burns itself out. It sort of dies, sheds its skin. And also look at asceticism, on its insistence on like the decay of the body. Essentially, all these pursuits of the highly like spiritual schools to try to get to spirit is fasting, it's decay, it's cannibalism, it's cannibalism, not cannibalism, it's consumption of self. To the point of an excess where you're just eating yourself, you're dying. You're sublimating the self. And it has to be this way because at the experiential level of a human being, to truly understand our place in the greater mind, the feelings of higher states, of psychedelics, of enlightenment, is this. It's the same theme over and over again. It's the death of self, death of ego, and immersion back into the totality of all things. The death of self. But we cheat oftentimes with drugs and stuff, right? We want the hack to get us there quick. But really, the classic trope and symbol is the walking of a mountain. We're pursuing the crystal clear skies above. That breath of fresh air. Where we've been on this long journey and we're exhausted, but now we can stand on top of this mountain, look out. We have perspective. We see now all where we came from. It all makes sense. We can see our path. But that itself is transcendence. It requires this journey up a mountain. And this journey up a mountain is life. And that moment of transcendence at the end, of spiritual apprehension, is actually what death is. I think it's true to say that the great irony, the great humor and tragedy, the great joke and tragedy of life itself is that you will probably only understand yourself and what this life was all about for you in totality right at the moment of death. And that's transcendence. Because a transcendence is a pushing through a boundary, and that boundary is death. And all of life is this welling up of energy, this building up of these abstract products in the form of memory, of ideas, of your own thinking, your own ways of looking at yourself. And these rigid, inert things themselves become the boundary that you break through ultimately at the last moment of transcendence, which is death, and apprehend yourself for what you really are. That is spirit understanding itself. And now at an even greater level, this is what the universe itself is moving towards. Just look at what we know from physics with heat death. That in trillions, quadrillions of years from now, the universe is going to just fizzle out. Protons, nuclear fission, nuclear fusion, all this that leads to new stars stops, it ceases. And there'll only be black holes just consuming, and then even those will die, and it'll be fucking nothing. It's because what the universe is, just as I was saying at our level, as human beings, we create things outside of ourselves because we're awareness. We create these abstract products, these art forms to look at that can then inform us about ourselves, because we can't actually grasp ourselves, so too the universe is doing that. But the whole of the physical universe, what we see as the universe, is itself the same thing that we're creating, but at its level. But since just as we age and we no longer need to create as much, as we whittle down our options, as we age and die, so too the universe will do the same thing. And it's shown to us right there in physics, and the physicists can tell us about it. I think this is just such an interesting way to look at things, because spirituality in our culture is always looked at as this like super young, vital thing, right? You know, you can see it's like in the New Age movement, it's lots of bright colors and associations with like veganism, right? This is like high energy like way of viewing the world, which is of course spirit, because all is spirit, all is God, all is the absolute, all is the one, whatever you want to call it. But I think the summation of spirit, the highest end and aim of spirituality, ends in death. And it's not because death is something evil, something wrong. It's that death is a moment of transcendence, where it's a moment of transcendence where spirit is finally apprehended itself. It no longer needs the physical things. It no longer, just as when you actually understand yourself, you no longer need to create anything. You don't need to make any art. You don't need to express yourself, because you just are. Now you just are. Right? Because this is what it comes down to at the end of the day. You already are what you are. But you insist on understanding yourself, which is something completely different. You want to apprehend yourself, which now means that you have to create and put things outside of yourself, because you can't see yourself. So you have to see only the things you can create outside of yourself that then inform you about yourself, because you can look at these things that inform you about its creator, which is you. But when you have finally understood yourself at this highest level, you no longer need these things anymore. And that's why the universe will fizzle out. That's why our lives fizzle out. And that's what death is ultimately. Death is the final moment of spirit in its apprehension of self. And it's only a death because it's a transcendence, because it no longer needs to create things outside of itself. It is now purely itself. Talk more about this subject in the future, but I think that's enough for now. Catch y'all later. Peace.